Hello, this is Dan the Furniture Repairman. This is part 2 of our barrel repair. We're going to touch up this color. Now, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some denatured alcohol. I'm going to use Mohawk Blendal stains, and I'm going to mix them up together. It's just a paper plate that I've put some tin foil on, and this is what I'm using as my palette. So you could see my denatured alcohol in that little cup, and then you can see I already have some colors on here. And this is just a little, I believe, a universal walnut. There's a bunch of different colors. You can look on the Mohawk website and see all the different options. Now, I'm going to streak this in, and you can see it's a pretty close match in a way. It's not perfect, but it's within the ballpark. It's not the wrong color. So working with colors is a lot like playing golf. You want to stay out of the trouble areas. So you want to try to take a good swing and hit it down the middle and get yourself closer to the goal. And what you don't want to do is try to make too big a shot and end up off in the woods or the rough or a water hazard or something. So you go slow and steady. Now the nice thing is, it's a par whatever it takes you to get there. So what I tend to do is try to reduce the amount of work with each layer. I don't try to get there in one layer, and then as I work, I sometimes will gain confidence and I know what to do next. So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm putting down what I would consider a good base color, and I'm going to spray it with my sealer and then see how it looks. And from there, I'm going to make a second color on top. Sometimes it's more of the first. Sometimes it's an adjustment of the first by adding in another color. And sometimes it's a completely different color. So you can see I'm just kind of short brushes here. I'm not painting this out. I'm leaving lights and darks. I'm leaving hot spots and highlights, and that's going to make it organic and make it blend in and look correct. Now, as the denatured alcohol dries, which it dries very quick, the color gets very chalky. That's just the powder that was in the little jar there, and now it's on that piece. Now, if we don't coat it with something, it's just going to rub off. So we have to spray it with we're going to spray it with a lacquer sealer, and then that's going to lock it in place. You can also just mix this with straight sealer and then apply it. I like doing it this way because it gives me the ability to manage it. I can add it a little bit at a time. It dries very quickly, and then I can actually move it when it's in a dry condition. Now right here I'm coming back with just denatured alcohol, and I'm brushing through, and when it's wet with the denatured, I'll know what it'll look like when I shoot my sealer on it. So here's my sealer on my gun. But on the right, you could see you could shoot it out of a rattle can. I'm shooting it in my spray booth. I'm going to shoot a couple quick coats on there, and we're going to take a look. Now, we're looking a lot like the body of the trunk, but not like the molding, which is darker and redder. But we are going in the correct way. So here we go. The sealer has dried, and now I'm coming back for coat number 2. So what I'm going to do is put a little denatured on my brush and get the palette a little wet with denatured, and I'm going to streak in right here. I'm a little too dark, so I'm going to streak in this lighter color. So this area needs to go lighter, and the other area needs to go darker. So in that other area, I'm going to use more of this same walnut color. I'm happy with the way that is laying down and that is looking. Now I'm going to go over it, but because I'm going multiple layers, there are going to be some layers that are coated twice, some layers that are coated once, and it's going to give me the look that I'm looking for. So that's very important, the layering, even if it's the same color. If you layer it and you don't paint the whole thing out, you'll end up looking the way you want. Now, I'm going to add some orange in. You see that orange right there on my palette? That's a very aggressive color. And what I'm going to do is just lightly pop it on in a few spots. I'm not going too heavy with it. And then you can see on the left there, I'm dipping my brush in denatured. And I'm going to come back, I'm going to work that orange in and move it around with my brush. The denatured is going to reactivate that powder. It's going to let me move it around. Now the color that's underneath the sealer is pretty much locked in. That's not going to change. So the sealer creates a safety layer for what I've already done for work. That means I could layer a color on top of it and build from there. So I'm adding orange, and it's funny, but orange is one of those colors that I use a lot to pull pieces together. Has a lot to do with varnishes and old shellacs having orange in them, and then old stains leaving orange when we strip pieces. So This is looking closer to where I want to be. I'm not quite there yet, but I am closer to, let's say, the flag that I want to get to. Now, as I work this, I'm not going to spray sealer on it yet. I'm going to add a little more color. So right here you can see putting my denatured. I'm making another part to my palette. And what I'm going to do is add this dark color right here. So you can see I'm getting it right there. And that's a very dark color. And I'm going to work in those grooves. And I'm streaking just a little bit on top of those long barrels or long beads, whatever you want to call them. So we're adding in some dark. Now dark is a color that when you go darker with things, you want to start slowly and then add to it. You don't want to get too aggressive too quick, because then you go too far. Now if you go too far, you can always just wipe it back off or brush it back off. And there's also quite a few differences in the different color darks that you can use. So there's some that have a lot of red in them, some that have a lot of green in them, and sometimes you'll put it on there and you'll be like, oh, that's the wrong color. So just take some denatured on your rag, wipe it off, go again. Now that's where those coats of sealer tend to give you a little bit of a safety, because you won't wipe off work that you've done. But right now I feel pretty good that I can go over this base color with a little bit darker, and then here you can see I've sprayed it with my sealer, and I'm getting there. I'm not there all the way, but I'm getting there. So what we're going to do is another layer, and we're going to add more color. Now right now I have the piece kind of lifted up in the air. I put a board underneath it to hold it, and it helps me get the light correct. So finding the light so you can see things is very important. And you can see I'm adding that orange in even more. So I put some in, but you could see how, there's brush strokes underneath it that are mimicking the natural wood grain. And the orange will lighten up some of the darker areas, and it'll tint some of the lighter areas, and we'll end up with a, hopefully a very close representation that'll blend in, and it'll be very hard to tell that the piece has been worked on or touched up. So now the piece itself is old, and we've left the distress, the old, in there. The customer felt like it would be more beautiful that way. I definitely agree. So I can't make this perfect. I have to make this, a little bit sloppy, like it's been around for a long time. The way the color will look after the varnish or the sealer is sprayed on it is the way it'll look when it's wet, not when it's dry. When it dries, it gets a little bit more chalky or opaque. And if you want to see what it'll look like once you have it on, then just brush on a little denatured alcohol, and then it will show you what you have in front of you without having to seal it. And then you can see at that time whether you need to back off some of your color. And you can see that orange is pretty aggressive there at the bottom. And we're going to either move it around or we're going to brush it off. We're going to keep working with it. So here I come with just straight denatured alcohol on my brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to move the orange around, and I'm going to streak it. And you can see we're getting closer. We're definitely closer to the wood. We're not quite equal to the barrel. And here I am. I'm grabbing my fan brush, and you can see my palette right there. It's got a few dots right there on the palette, and then I'm just going to take my powder and I'm going to make a little paint color in there. Just like first grade art class, you make a little color up on your little piece of paper there, and I'm adding a little bit more brown in. And it kind of seems crazy that you would add a brown in and then an orange in and then a brown in, another color in, but it's what works. It's the way the color shines through certain areas, and it's not going to be exact. It's going to be a bit of a mishmash, and that's what's going to make it be represented like the piece of wood itself. So I'm brushing very heavily right here, and now I'm coming back with a little denatured, and then just a little bit of a rag, and I'm doing a little bit of a padding right here to pull off the bulk of the color, but leave it in other places. And now I'm coming back with my denatured, just denatured on a brush, and wherever that powder is, it's going to take a couple brush strokes, but it will reactivate it, and it will let me move it around a little bit. And I'm just going to keep eyeballing it and seeing what works well. So a little more just straight denatured on the brush, and we're going to push it around a little, and you can see the denature is rubbing off down there. So here we go, just like that. And now I'm going to clean my brush on my rag. And what that's going to do is let me pull some of that darker color right off the piece. I'm going to wipe it just like that. And, sometimes you wipe it and it'll look perfect. Sometimes it looks worse. Sometimes it looks better. But the key is to realize that you've learned something. You've learned what to do or what not to do. And if what you did looks bad, then you've learned what not to do. And very often what I'll say in my shop is we succeed by failing. So we try something and it doesn't work. So we try something else and it does work. Sometimes with color you'll fail 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and all of a sudden you'll stumble on a solution because there's just no other thing to try. And you'll be like, oh wow, and then it'll click in your brain how to make that color in the future. So unless you have tremendous color matching skills, you basically start out by trial and error. There's no book to read. There's no formula. You have to add it. Every color is a little bit different. And you have to have a little bit of confidence that if you keep mixing things and playing with them and adjusting them, you'll get them to where they need to be. And whatever you got to do to make it happen. So here we go. I'm going to spray this again. Now this is me spraying it with my sealer. Just like that. Couple good heavy coats, and now I'm looking at right here and I feel like I have a very good flow to this whole piece. So I would call this done. Now this piece is going to get varnished next. This has been Dan the Furniture Repairman. Thank you so much for watching. Y'all have a good day.